Hi, this is Garibay, and today I'm going to talk about, specifically I'm going to talk about Gary Gygax. So, and his relationship, and Gary Gygax specifically compared to William Shakespeare, okay? So, I had a comment on one of my videos by a gentleman that goes by the tag, the Novice DM. And he said, I was talking about backstories and how backstories are really high art, right? So backstories that are written for role-playing games are really high art, right? And he says, well, hey, I think you're thinking too much there. I don't really feel that backstories are art at all. And, and I had said, Gary Gygax, he's the father of tabletop role-playing games, and he was a high artist, right? What he did was high art, right? And so Novice DM said, no, Gary Gygax, it's great that he invented Dungeons & Dragons, but he's no William Shakespeare, right? And so it really made me think about that, and I agree with you. I agree with Novice DM that Gary Gygax, the father of Dungeons & Dragons, is no William Shakespeare. He is distinctly a greater writer and a greater artist than William Shakespeare ever was. And here's why, okay? So what William Shakespeare did was he created a large number of exceptional plays. And the plays that he created were truly exceptional, right? And I think what he did was he mastered a specific craft, which was playwriting. And I will agree that, that William Shakespeare is in the top 3 playwrights of all times, right? However, here's the thing that makes Gary Gygax a greater writer and a greater artist than William Shakespeare. One, William Shakespeare was an iterator, so he iterated he iterated playwriting. He did not create playwriting. He did not creating plays and writing plays. He mastered that craft, right? Now, Gary Gygax, he created a world-changing art platform. He created a genre. He created tabletop role-playing games. That is a creation that creates art, right? So when Gary Gygax created tabletop role-playing games, he created game masters who create thousands and thousands of games which entertain thousands and thousands of more players. Gary Gygax created players who write backstories for characters. That is, each one of those backstories is a piece of art, right? And delving into new worlds and new creatures and new objects and new just new elements that had not existed before, right? And so he created an entirely new genre of art, right? And that is better than mastering a craft, right? In some ways, Gary Gygax was not able to master tabletop role-playing games because he is the creator of tabletop role-playing game. He was fundamentally working on a level that William Shakespeare never worked on, right? And so that to me is very important. Is he's actually a creator, not just an iterator, and that's a huge difference, right? The other thing that I think is really distinct is I think that Gary Gygax is going to end up having a much greater reach, right, than William Shakespeare will ever have. And the reason for that is there are things that are within Dungeons & Dragons that are so unique, right, and so world-impacting that they far surpass what William Shakespeare was able to do, right? And so what is that specifically? What did he do that William Shakespeare? And that is leveling, the concept of leveling. The concept of, okay, here's a champion or a hero, and they are on a journey. And during that journey, they are going to get new skills. They're going to get allies. They're going to get equipment. And he created a system in which the narrative story of a hero's journey has distinct rings, or steps on a ladder, so leveling, right? Now, what has leveling impacted? One, I think Dungeons & Dragons has changed virtually every single fantasy novel that's been written since 1974 and on, right? Since its creation. Even more so than Tolkien, right? And the other thing is this whole concept of leveling, but it definitely impacted the way books are written, but it also impacted video games, and that's the killer app there. That's the killer feature, right? Video games use leveling as it's like foundational, right? So characters in video games generally level, and it will either say literally, hey, this is the leveling that is done, or or it'll go forward. And that is really kind of interesting, to me, that the leveling is there. And so that's really fascinating to me, just how much leveling impacts video games, right? Now, my point is, video games are already having a broad impact on our culture, on the culture of the world, far more so than plays, right? We still have plays today, but Hamilton is, actually, I love Hamilton. Hamilton's an awesome musical, right? But if you walk into a city, into Philadelphia, and you spin around and you throw a rock, the person you hit with that rock, the odds of them knowing about Hamilton, maybe 50-50, if that. Depends on where you're at when you do it. The impact of plays is not nearly, now you go into the city and you spin around and you throw a rock and see how many people have played a video game that has leveling. You're going to hit somebody with a rock who has dealt with leveling, right? And the other thing is, the reach of Gary Gygax is so much farther than William Shakespeare. Here's another one. So Gary Gygax, when he went into tabletop role-playing game, he created a brand new way of telling stories, and that is branching storytelling, right? So a game master going and having multiple branches before he reaches the table, multiple ways that story can go, and the players getting to choose, right? Well, what has that impacted? That has impacted virtually every single writer's room that has ever existed for every single movie and for every single television show, right? So that's really fascinating to me, right? They tell branching stories all the time. There are multiple writers saying, well, what if we do this? What do we do this? What do we do this, right? The idea of collaborative storytelling is, really ramped up. And right now, if you look at the writers in television and movies, I would say easily 50 to 75% of them have played Dungeons & Dragons and are really adamant Dungeons & Dragons fans. And the reason why is the work they're doing is fundamentally exactly what Gary Gygax taught them to do, these branching stories, right? So this is another theme that I just really am fascinated by, and I'm really trying to get it out there, right? What we are in right now in Dungeons & Dragons is there really isn't, Dungeons & Dragons does not nearly have the respect that it should. It is a piece of pure Americana, and it should have 10 times the respect it has today, right? And the reason why is it's impacting culture all over the world. Dungeons & Dragons really is. And so what we are right now in 2016, which is like 40, we're looking at like 42 years after the creation of Dungeons & Dragons, is we're looking at like Marvel and DC in the 60s and 70s. Comic books were throwaway. Nobody put them in in bags and backboards, right? Start dealing with comic book fans today and see what they do. They spend $4 to $5 on a comic book, and then they spend 25 cents to put that into a Mylar sleeve with a backboard, and every comic book is kept pristine, because it is known to be high art. And that's exactly what Dungeons & Dragons is. So Gary Gygax is a much greater writer and a much greater artist than William Shakespeare, without a doubt, right? And as we go decades and centuries into the future, even maybe years, like for instance, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie is coming out in 2017, 2018. If that movie hits, right, you could see a renaissance of a real change in how people consider Gary Gygax's work and what he created, because it truly is, baseball, comic books, jazz, Dungeons and Dragons. Those four things have changed the world, and Dungeons and Dragons belongs in that list. And because it belongs in that list, William Shakespeare, he wrote some good stuff, but he was no Gary Gygax. Thank you very much.